Picture a 6-year-old who has never known a world without a touchscreen, who learned to swipe before they learned to tie their shoes, who, when handed a physical photo album for the first time, instinctively tried to pinch zoom it, who asks their parents questions not with, "Can we look that up?" but, "Can we ask the AI?" This child is not a curiosity. This child is a generation, and they are already here. Generation Alpha, born from 2013 onward. The oldest of them are 12, 13 years old right now. They didn't just grow up with technology, they were born into it the way previous generations were born into language, into gravity, into the simple assumption that the world works a certain way. For Generation Alpha, the world works digitally, always has, always will. And the psychological implications of that are something we are only beginning to understand. Most adults look at these kids and reach for one of two reactions. Either alarm, screens everywhere, attention spans gone, civilization crumbling, or dismissal. Every generation panics about the next one. Kids are resilient, they'll be fine. Both reactions are understandable. Neither is particularly useful. What's more interesting and more honest is to actually look at what's happening inside these developing minds, because something genuinely unprecedented is taking place. Let's start with the most fundamental shift, which isn't about screens at all. It's about the nature of information itself. Every generation before Alpha grew up in a world where not knowing something was a normal, sustained human experience. You had a question. It lived with you for hours, days, sometimes years before you found an answer. You asked an adult. You went to a library. You waited. And in that waiting, something happened. The brain engaged with the question itself, turned it over, made connections, built tolerance for uncertainty. For Generation Alpha, that experience essentially doesn't exist. Any question? Answered in 4 seconds. By a voice, without even having to type. The friction of not knowing has been nearly eliminated. Now, you might think that's purely a benefit, and in many ways it is. Access to information at this scale would have seemed miraculous to any previous generation. But cognitive scientists have been studying what happens to the brain when the struggle to find answers is removed, and the findings are nuanced. The struggle, it turns out, is part of the learning. The psychological concept called desirable difficulty, the idea that some friction in the learning process actually deepens retention and understanding, suggests that effortless information retrieval and deep knowledge acquisition are not the same thing. Generation Alpha may know more facts more quickly than any generation before them. Whether they develop the same capacity for sustained inquiry, for sitting with complexity, for building arguments from incomplete information, is a genuinely open question. But here's where it gets more interesting. Because Generation Alpha isn't just growing up with faster information, they're growing up with personalized information. Algorithmically curated, constantly adapting, reflecting their preferences back at them with eerie accuracy. Your streaming service knows what you want to watch before you do. Your feed shows you the exact flavor of content that kept you watching yesterday. And a child raised entirely within these systems is a child whose cognitive and emotional world is, to an unprecedented degree, shaped around them. Psychologists call this the echo chamber effect when we talk about adults. But for Generation Alpha, it's something more foundational. It's not that their existing beliefs are being reinforced, it's that their preferences, their tastes, their very sense of what is interesting and worth attending to is being formed inside a personalized digital environment. The question this raises for developmental psychology is genuinely fascinating. What happens to the capacity for surprise, for genuine novelty, for the encounter with something that wasn't chosen for you, when the entire information architecture of your childhood was designed to give you more of what you already like? There's a concept in psychology called optimal frustration, the idea, developed by Heinz Kohut, that healthy psychological development requires a certain amount of not getting exactly what you want, exactly when you want it. Small, manageable disappointments that teach the self to regulate, to wait, to find internal resources. The overly frictionless digital environment that Generation Alpha inhabits doesn't automatically provide this, which isn't a condemnation of technology. It's a challenge that parents, educators, and designers are going to have to think about very carefully. Now let's talk about something that rarely makes it into these conversations: the social development of Generation Alpha. Because they are not the isolated screen zombies of popular imagination. In many ways, they are extraordinarily socially sophisticated. They have grown up watching YouTube creators, influencers, streamers, people who talk directly to camera, directly to audience, with a warmth and accessibility that traditional media never had. Many Generation Alpha children have a more developed vocabulary for emotional experience than previous generations did at the same age. They talk about anxiety, boundaries, mental health, emotional needs, concepts that previous generations didn't have language for until well into adulthood, if ever. This is genuinely significant. One of the barriers to psychological health in older generations was the absence of language for inner experience. If you can't name what you're feeling, you can't process it, communicate it, or ask for help with it. Generation Alpha, raised on content that normalizes emotional vocabulary, may have advantages here that we're not fully appreciating yet. But there's a flip side. Emotional vocabulary, absorbed from screens, is not the same as emotional experience, processed in relationship. A child can know the word anxiety and be able to use it correctly in a sentence, and still not have developed the embodied, relational skills for actually navigating anxiety in real time, in person, with another human being whose reactions are unpredictable and unedited. The gap between talking about feelings and working through feelings, that gap requires real, unscripted, sometimes uncomfortable human interaction to close. And that kind of interaction is precisely what the digital environment tends to replace. Here's the deepest thing I want to leave you with. Every generation is shaped by the dominant medium of its childhood. Oral cultures produced people with extraordinary memory and communal identity. Print culture produced the kind of linear, sequential thinking that built the Enlightenment. Television produced a generation fluent in visual narrative, but somewhat passive as receivers. The internet produced people comfortable with hyperlink thinking, nonlinear, associative, constantly cross-referencing. And Generation Alpha? They are being shaped by something we don't even have a clean name for yet. It's not just the internet. It's the personalized, responsive, AI-mediated, always-on internet. An environment that responds to them, adapts to them, speaks to them in a voice they find comfortable, and gets better at anticipating what they need the longer they use it. The medium of Generation Alpha is, for the first time in human history, a medium that learns. What kind of minds does a responsive, adaptive, personalized information environment produce? We genuinely don't know yet. The oldest alphas are 12. The research will take decades to fully emerge. But the question is worth sitting with, because these children are not a problem to be solved or a generation to be worried about. They are the leading edge of something genuinely new in human cognitive and psychological development. And the way we respond to that, with panic, with dismissal, or with genuine curiosity and care, will shape what they become far more than the screens ever could. If you're a parent of a Gen Alpha kid, or a teacher, or just someone who finds this stuff fascinating, drop a comment. What do you notice about this generation that you can't quite explain yet? I'd genuinely love to know. And if you're new here, we do this every week, exploring the psychology of how people are shaped by the worlds they're born into. Subscribe if that's a conversation you want to keep having. See you next time.